Welcome to Live at the Ink Home Edition. Today's broadcast is brought to you by Evolution Sails, Sailing Evolved, VX1, the fastest growing one design in North America, Sailing Ink, get it at the ink, J-Boats, Sailing Ink is the broadest reaching J-Boat dealer in North America. Also, be sure to stop by thesailinginc.com to see today's daily deal. Enjoy the show.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Live at the Ink Home Edition. I think we're just talking to Rand in the background, and I think we've counted on both of our hands. We've come up with 10 episodes of Live at the Ink between the Evolution Sales page and the Sailing Ink page, and we're having a good time with it. It sounds like we're getting a lot of good press. One of our shows from last week actually has over 35,000 views, so we're knocking on ESPN's door, I believe, which is pretty fun, pretty cool. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to today's interview. About a year and a half ago, Jerome Rand came to the Sail Loft, and we set up a whole bunch of chairs and put a screen up on the stage, which is our sewing table. And he gave us a brief talk about a trip that he went on. And so what Jerome did is in 2012, he decided he was just finishing up hiking the Appalachian Trail. And he decided he wanted to go sail around the world. He's going to give us a little bit more on this. But in 2012, he decided he wanted to do it. He took 5 years. He purchased himself a Westsail 32, and he outfitted it and got it launched. And in 2017, took off on October 3rd to sail around the world. And it took him 271 days. And I believe the premise was to do it nonstop, unassisted. We're going to hear a little bit more about that one as we go. But first, I'm going to lead with just a quick video, as I always do, just kind of talking about what he was up to. That'll get people tuned in, and then we'll see if we can't get him on the horn here. Hold on one second.
I started sailing sort of late in life compared to most people, and I think it was somewhere around the point where I started doing offshore ocean sailing, just yacht deliveries and such when I was in my early 20s. And at that point, you know, I started to really enjoy being out there, and then started reading some of the old books, Bernard Moitessier and Robin Knox Johnson, and I must have read Sailing Alone Around the World by Joshua Slocum 10 times. And the idea of just being out there and sort of living this completely different life to what most people live nowadays, just it fascinated me, and I had to see what it was like. I spent about 6 months sailing on the boat by myself in preparation, trying to break everything I could and fix it and break it and fix it, and until I knew how I'd fix it correctly. And then after that, it was spending the whole summer trying to get the boat ready for the actual trip. The boat typically will do about 5 or 5.5 knots as an average speed. So it's looking like probably around 280 days is the best estimate I can do. But again, you know, a lot of things can go. Wind can change and things can break down and slow me down. I mean, you know, it's my rough estimate, basically.
All right, the plan is I'm going to start off here. I'm going to ride the current across about 2/3 of the way across, and then I start my way down. And I head down a little bit closer towards Brazil. And then I come down riding the current almost in the center. In the center is a big calm patch. So I'm going to go around that, and then I hit the Southern Ocean. The westerlies take me all the way across, underneath Australia, underneath Tasmania, underneath Stewart Island, New Zealand, cross all the way over, and then I come all the way across, go underneath Cape Horn, keep going across for a little bit, catch the current going north, cross here, do my flyby of the Bitter End Yacht Club, and then straight up past Bermuda, right back.
I think I'm most excited, honestly, about rounding each of the capes Cape of Good Hope, Cape Lewin, south of Tasmania, south of New Zealand, and then Cape Horn. And obviously Cape Horn is kind of the big one. I've never really worried too much about the actual solidarity of the trip. And I do kind of find there are some perks. You're not going to ever disturb anybody if you feel like listening to loud music at 3 in the morning. If you want to eat all the bacon, nobody's going to get mad at you. I'm not trying to set any records or anything like that, and I'm not trying to make sort of a statement about, I don't know, my sailing abilities or anything like that, but there's something about being able to go and do the whole trip around without stopping and getting back, doing it on your own. I feel like things like this are slowly fading into the background, and maybe it takes doing trips like these to remind people, what life is really all about.
All right, guys. Thanks for everybody coming out.
I love you. I think these sort of experiences are what life is all about, and sitting there and dreaming about it and then letting sort of time creep by to the point where I couldn't go and do this, I think that would be harder to take in the end than the 280 days of solidarity out there will be, for sure.
All right. Hope everybody enjoyed that little video. He sent that over to me the other day, and we condensed it a little bit so we could put it together for you, and it was a good brief. So let's see if we can't get Jerome on the line here. It takes just a second to pull him in. 2, 1, and there he is. Hey, Jerome.
Bill, how you doing, sir?
Can you hear me? Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Yeah. Great.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
So where do we find you these days?
Right now, I am stuck up in northern Michigan, of all places. You're actually closer to the boat than I am. The boat's down in Beaufort, South Carolina. But okay. I'm hoping to get back down there, I don't know, probably in a week or so. But we'll just see how things happen.
Nice. Very nice. Well, let us know if there's anything we can do for you from here. I mean, we're just a reach out there. So hopefully the boat's okay. There's been a few tornadoes through this area.
Yeah,
lately.
I know. When I see the forecasts, I'm always a little hesitant to really check the radar. But I don't know. Yeah. I'm sure she's fine. The marina staff are there, and there's a guy living on the boat right next to mine. So I'm sure if the water line started creeping down, he would he'd probably notice it. Fingers crossed.
There you go. Awesome. So up in Michigan, eh? Okay. That's great. So yeah, welcome, and let's dig right in. I'm going to ask the same question I ask everybody because all I do is interview sailors. So you know what it's going to be. When, on what, and what drove you to sailing?
All right. Well, I started pretty late. So when I was about 18 years old, that's when I got my first little taste of sailing. And it was really all done on a Hobie 16 up here in northern Michigan. And, it was one of those things that once I started, it was like somebody, touching a piano for the first time and being able to just play. It all made perfect sense to me. It felt great. And on a Hobie Cat, at that age, it's all about speed and thrills and, hiking out. And I was absolutely hooked. I think I started teaching sailing the following summer after that. So I was hooked.
Nice. And you taught sailing up there in Michigan at the local club?
Yeah. Well, the University of Michigan has a family camp up here, and they have a huge yacht club. I don't know. We had close to about 100 boats. Mostly like 22-foot ensigns, Hobie Cats, butterflies, lasers, stuff like that. And I did that for almost like 10 summers. And then eventually ended up heading on down to the British Virgin Islands and working at the Bitter End Yacht Club. And that was really where I was sort of cutting my teeth, getting a bit more wind than you usually get on the inland lakes here in Michigan down there.
And what did you taught sailing there as well?
Yeah, I started out as the head instructor, and then pretty quickly took over as the manager for their water sports program, and that was just, I mean, it was just a ball. 11 months out of the year, fantastic conditions. That was where I got to meet a lot of the great sailors, guys like Kenny Reed and stuff like that. And it's just my eyes were open to a huge sailing world once I got down there. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've not been to Bitter End Yacht Club, unfortunately. Hopefully I get to go there after it comes back together. But what's the story there? It got knocked out by a hurricane, but
yeah, Hurricane Irma took it out. And just as I was actually getting ready to set sail for my trip, but complete, total loss, totaled the place. And now they're already starting to break ground. They're doing new foundations. They've got the whole plan going, and the ownership is really they dove right in on this, and they're really excited to get things hopping. And obviously with what's going on today, it'll probably slow things down a little bit, but they're headed back there, and I think sooner rather than later they'll have their mooring field, the docks, a nice restaurant and bar going. That's their sort of first phase. And then they're just going to keep expanding back to there. And I think their biggest thing is to, renovate and updo everything, but also hold on to that history that they have, because it was just such a unique place down there. I mean, you can't find another place like that.
Yeah, it sounds like it's almost a bit of a cult following. Once you go and you're in, and it's everybody that I've ever met that's been a part of or been able to go down there, they're a certain breed, and they're great folks, right? And they love it. So
yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, you haven't experienced the BVI unless you go to the bitter end. I mean, unless you capsize a Hobie cat and then go back in and talk about it at the bar while eating a little bit of key lime pie from Winston. There's just that's all of it. It's perfect.
Absolutely. So at what point did you obviously you took a break because you went and hiked the trail? After you got down there, I may have fast forwarded a little bit on you, but how did you get to the point that enter 2012 that you wanted to go sail around the world?
Well, yeah, it was sort of I had been down there for 5 years, and in my position there, sort of running the water sports, it's full on. I mean, it's everything from working 10, 12 hours during the day and getting called in the middle of the night because somebody's boat broke free and you got to go rescue them. So after 5 years, I needed to just go and do something else. And so I took off to go do the Appalachian Trail. It seemed like a really good idea at the time. And it was, it's a lot of punishment, but the feeling you get when you get into Maine and you approach that last mountain, there's nothing like it. And that was what really started to get the gears spinning as far as, well, if this is so good, what's going to be even better? And, I had always had this idea sort of cooked up in my head about sailing around the world. And that really came from when I did, I started doing a few yacht deliveries here and there. And I would always find the same books on the shelf of every boat. And it was, Bernard Motissier's, The Long Way, or Robin Knox Johnson's A World of My Own, Sailing Alone Around the World, Joshua Slocum, and I kept reading them. And even if I'd read it 5 times, I would still pick it up. I mean, I was enthralled by it. And just the idea that you could take a small boat and you could just wrap the world and come back. It just, I don't know. It was something that I had to stash it away because I think almost every sailor thinks about it at one point in their life. They're like, man, I love this sailing. I think I could go all the way around the world. But, in reality, it's a lot bigger than that. And so I sort of tucked it away. But yeah, after the Appalachian Trail, I don't know. I was just looking for something. And, unfortunately, when you finish the Appalachian Trail, you've got a big beard, a dirty backpack, no job, no money, and so, and obviously I didn't have a boat at that point. So I came up with my plan, and I went back down to Bitter End, saved everything I could, and started searching for the boat.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so what made you decide on the West Sail 32?
2 words: perfect storm. So you're familiar
Okay.
with, the movie and the book. Perfect
Yep.
Storm happens. I believe it was 97. But in that, during that gale, that horrific storm, there was a sailboat that was a West Sail 32. It was named Satori. And even after the people were pulled off of it and everything, the Coast Guard rescued them. The boat managed to sail itself through the rest of that storm, and then it beached somewhere in New Jersey. And it pretty much didn't have any damage or anything. And so, as a testament to what a boat can take, that's about as big as you can get. And so I started researching them and looking into them, and they are definitely a slow boat, but man, what they lose in speed, they make up for in safety. I mean, for me, the idea of venturing into the Southern Ocean on a boat that isn't built like a tank is pretty scary. And I figured, obviously I'm not going to be able to get an open 60 or anything like that. I'm not going for any records. I just want to actually do this adventure. And so, and they were actually pretty well budgeted. I was able to find them at pretty reasonable prices. And my mom and I actually went on a road trip, and we looked at, 5, 6 of them on one little week-long venture. And finally, I ended up finding one that was about 2/3 of the way complete. And that was the one I landed on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So does that boat by chance fit into the Golden Globe?
I believe so. Don McIntyre, the guy who started that race, he and I emailed back and forth a few times after I finished. He was watching the trip, and he had remarked that they were thinking about making the Falkland Islands one of their race gates where you dropped off film and did a check-in. But after seeing what I went through to get in there, he said, no, we're not going to use that spot. It's pretty hairy in there. But he had said, he was like, we're going to run it again in 2022. So I'm sure the West Sail would be eligible for that. And who knows? I think he's holding a few spots open for sort of like guest invites, so to speak. But you never know. You never know. That's the future. If my mom is listening, just don't worry about it, Mom. We'll talk later.
I may have gotten another scoop there.
Who knows?
We can get Graham Dalton back on the hook. He'll probably talk you right into it. He'll be like, Jerome, if it's the only thing you can do now at this point. You've done it once. You've got the pattern. You just got to go do it now.
Exactly. Well, it's such an interesting race, I think, because I think it's less about who has the fastest boat, because you're in the Southern Ocean for that long. It's the weather that each person has to deal with, and it's almost one of those things where it's the last man standing. I mean, well, they started out with 18. And how many finished it? 5 or 6?
5, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. Who knows?
Who knows?
I'm gonna sneak down to the boat and put a big Golden Globe sticker on it.
There we go. Yeah.
With a little coffee cup, for people to put donations in.
There we go. Yeah, I know. Well, that's the tough part. I don't do any like sponsorship stuff, and that I'm sure the boat would need a really big going over as far as the safety gear on board and such. Yeah. I don't like to say that I was sort of winging it, but I was sort of winging it. I mean, I have a decent amount of experience offshore and stuff like that from deliveries, but I was using the books that were written in the 70s about people doing this. Those were my guidebooks, because my boat was built in 75. And, any information that's coming out of, current Vendée Globe guys, stuff like that, it just isn't pertinent to me, because those guys are doing 6 times my hull speed. And so I really needed to know what it was like to do this, in 1970s style. And fortunately it worked, because I'm still here today.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the route. Let me see if I can pop this up here real quick and make it big enough to where everybody can see it. I'm going to pull myself out of it. Everybody will be like, yes.
There it is. Oh,
So,
man.
so you started up here, Massachusetts, right?
Yep, Gloucester, Massachusetts. That was sort
Okay.
of to honor Joshua Slocum, and also the first guy who crossed the Atlantic solo was Alfred Johnson back in 1876 in a 22-foot dory, a
Oh.
wooden dory. It took him 66 days to get from Gloucester to Liverpool. That is crazy.
And then I know you guys can't see my mouse, but I'm using it as a pointer anyway. But you didn't go straight south. You carried the ocean currents, the weather currents across the North Atlantic, right?
Yeah, so it's basically, one of the challenges when you leave from the United States to do this is that, especially at the time in the beginning of October, we're still in the hurricane season at that point. And so you're cutting across the hurricane track, and you basically want to get as far out into the Atlantic as you can, so that also once you get over there, when you get into the easterly trade winds, you could then head south, instead of, if I were to do a direct route from Gloucester, towards the coast of Africa, I'd be beating into the wind, and, a west sail does not like to beat into the wind, and neither do I. So, I was aiming to go about 2/3 of the way across, but
Okay.
there was one last little hurricane. That was Hurricane Ophelia, and she sort of got in my way. So I headed south a lot earlier than I wanted to, and that basically meant that I did. I ended up having to beat like crazy into the wind for a while, but
Right.
I'd rather do that than tangle with a hurricane right at the start of this thing. But then, yeah, you basically go down to the equator. South Atlantic is beautiful, great trade wind sailing, and then you start working your way down to the Southern Ocean, and that's where the fears, the anxieties, the uncertainties all start to bubble forth, and you get in there, and once you're there, I mean, there's almost really no turning back. I mean, it's a strange feeling because as you get closer and closer, even when you're still 500 miles north of it, you start to see the swell coming from the gales that are way down there, and there's just a weight and sort of a magnitude to it where you sort of know it's almost like the Hobbit, seeing Mordor in the distance, and you start of thinking like, we got to go there. Oh man, this is gonna get bad, but that's part of the adventure as well, is to go down there and see what it's really like. Because up until that point, I had only read about it, and
Yeah.
most of the reading doesn't make it look pretty by any means. But
Right.
there's something about it that definitely inspired me to give it a shot.
Yeah. So I'm going to rewind just a little bit. When you came down, still in the Atlantic, and you did follow the South American coastline for a little bit, and then made your cut across. How far south did you get before you started heading east?
I was down in the variables, so probably around 30 or 35 degrees south.
Okay.
Once the trade winds sort of cut out on you, then you start to get into some westerlies here and there, and you start riding the northern edge of some of the big gales, and
Yeah.
so you just gun it across. And the South Atlantic is a pretty spooky place. The storms that sort of roll off the Andes and stuff way down in the southern tip of South America can just get walloping. And I'm reading the books, and Bill King, the South Atlantic was when he encountered like 100-knot gale, and he was dismasted, and those are the sort of things that you think about. And so you really just want to get out of there as fast as possible. But it's also one of those things where you leave one scary place like the South Atlantic and enter the Indian Ocean, which is even a little more terrifying because it's so unruly there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get down. I think to get under the Cape of Good Hope is about 37 degrees south, but to avoid the Agulhas Current, which is the really big danger zone, kind of comparable to the Gulf Stream, you've got to get down to about 41 or 42 degrees south to safely get behind that.
Right. Okay. And then you could pretty much carry that one, through to at least New Zealand, right? Before you start into the Pacific.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I ended up going a bit north in the Indian Ocean just to sort of avoid some of the severe weather further south. And then as soon as I got about halfway across and the water pump broke and all that sort of stuff happened, I'm sure we'll get into that, but I had to get further south into basically rainier, nastier weather, sort of just to be able to get water first off, but also to keep me going. So when I went underneath Australia, New Zealand, I was down at about 45 to 50 degrees south. And again, the further south you go, the shorter the distance to get out of the Southern Ocean. It's sort of this funny trade-off, where it's, I could go further, it's going to be rougher, but I'm going to get out of here faster. Yeah. And then, obviously you get into the Pacific, and I think I rode about 45 degrees south for the majority of that, ducking and dodging a few things here and there. But the big dip is always Cape Horn, where you've got to go down to about 57 degrees south before you can round that and then start making your way back home.
Yeah. And as you correctly called it today, this afternoon, you reminded me it's the Fifth Cape, right?
Yeah, Fifth Cape. And that was, it's one of those things where they're the greatest waypoints on the planet. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, how awesome is it to use continents as your race marks, so to speak? Because even though I wasn't racing against anybody else, I'm still, the minute you get in the Southern Ocean, you're racing against time, because you need to get out of the Southern Ocean before the wintertime comes in. And things get really, really bad down there. So you're trying to hustle as fast as you can, as safely as you can do it. So
and then you're back into the South Atlantic, you head north on the current, and then get into the Caribbean and up the East Coast.
And that's it. Yeah, and I'll tell you that once you round the tip of Brazil, I had 12 days where the winds were so consistent. I only had to put in 2 reefs the whole time in 12 days. I literally could have, if I could have slept 24 hours a day, I could have done it without any problem at all.
Really?
It was the most consistent sailing I've ever had in my life. It was really, I don't know. I was bored to the point of just like, something's got to happen around here. Nothing did. It was absolute, just perfect trade sailing.
That's awesome. So let me pull myself back up here real quick, and so let's talk a little bit about the dangers of what you might run into. Obviously, you touched a little bit on the Southern Ocean and hurricanes and cyclones, and so what did you have in store? What did you know was going to happen versus what actually happened when it came to nature?
Well, I definitely knew that I was going to have to deal with some pretty heavy weather once I got down south in the Southern Ocean, for sure. I mean, that goes without saying. I was down there, I think, for 4 months total. And if you're down there for that long, you're going to see some nasty stuff. I didn't really take into account the hurricane seasons and the cyclone seasons. I mean, I knew about them, but I sort of figured once I got in the Southern Ocean, I'd be so far south of it, it wouldn't really affect me. And I was dead wrong on that one. I mean, I had 2 cyclones, one in the Indian Ocean that just clipped me, and then one that, as it was falling apart in the Pacific, just sat right on top of me, turned into a big, massive gale. Just really was nasty. That picture, that was in the South Tasman Sea. That was a nasty one. That was
really?
One of those gales where I had wandered into a counter current, and so I had wind against sea, and the waves just heaped up like unbelievably quick, and they were breaking. That was one of the times where I was definitely questioning whether or not I would actually make it through the night, just because these walls of water were just coming and coming, and they were coming from two directions. So there's not a whole lot that you can do in that situation to, make yourself feel more comfortable in what's going on. But, I had my little lifeline though, because my younger brother, Adam, he was sort of keeping an eye on things and stuff. And, that was the one where, I texted him asking him what was going on. And all I got back was, you're in a real bad spot. That was it. Period. Okay.
Gee, thanks.
Yeah. And then he got back with more information and stuff. But it was nice at that point, to be that sort of scared and not know what's going to happen, to just have that little lifeline that I could reach out and get a little information. And just honestly, just to tell somebody how scared I was, that felt good. You bottle that stuff up. It's not a good thing to do.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you texted with your brother. What equipment did you have on board for, say, navigation and communication and so on? Weather forecasting?
Yeah, it was pretty basic stuff. I obviously had a sextant on board, and I used that for the North and South Atlantic. Once I got into the Southern Ocean, I pretty much packed that sucker away and then was just going off the GPS. I had an AIS, the automatic identification system, for tracking other boats. That gave me a little GPS read. And then I have this old plotter from, I think it's from like the late 90s or early 2000s. It came with the boat. And so I had that as my backup. But for communication, I was using a Garmin InReach. And that was a godsend. I mean, I was about to go out there with, if you're familiar with the spot tracker, where you just press the button, and I received an email from a cousin, and he said, "Hey, you better look at this." And it was a map showing the areas where the spot tracker does not work. And it was pretty much the entire Pacific and a lot of the Southern Ocean. Because, people don't use them, I guess, that often. And so we had to switch up real quick. And it was great because I was able to update my mom every day. I could, I'd get random texts from people, and, it was just an amazing feeling just to be able to text here and there. I did have a sat phone on board, but I found it really wasn't that great in that, if I was talking to somebody for a few minutes, as soon as I hung up that phone, the world would sort of come crashing back in on me of what I was doing and where I was. And I would just fall into a big depression. It was terrible. So I ended up sort of having to cut that off. But I was using the phone just to download the weather on my computer, which, maybe every 3 to 5 days, I would be able to do that. And that really was the extent of the technology on board the Mighty Sparrow. It was very, very basic. It was on a pretty tight budget, but also, I was heeding the warnings of Motissier when, he says, you need to really keep a boat simple. The longer you're going to be at sea, everything needs to be simple, because it's not going to break. You get these complicated systems, they just can't stand up to that long of a time being out there, just constantly assaulted.
Right. And how did you teach yourself the weather forecasting side of it? Did you have somebody else doing the forecasting and feeding it to you, or were you basically just getting basic grid files and doing it yourself?
Yeah, I was just getting the grid files. If there was something outside of my sort of immediate area, like the cyclones, like Cyclone Irving and stuff like that, my brother would chime in and let me know, this thing is happening. It might affect you. But for me, it was pretty much, I'd download a sizable chunk of the grid files around my area, and I'd look at it, and that was really some of the most nerve-wracking 10 minutes while I'm watching and waiting for it to download, especially in the Southern Ocean, because as soon as you click on it and you start to see, you're like, okay, what's this next week going to be?
Exactly.
And sometimes, you'd think, you'd be like, the last forecast was great, this is going to be awesome. And then you get through a couple of days and you see a monster gale coming, and you just shoulders drop, and and I had to debate a little bit because, I don't know sometimes if it was better to know what was coming and worry about it, or just not know at all. Because the barometer really would tell me everything I needed to know. It was like clockwork. I was just shocked at how efficient and how effective a barometer was at telling me, what was about to happen and what was going to take place. But I don't know. In the end, it's always better to know a little bit, and that way, you can at least prepare yourself.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned the barometer. So, a few weeks back, I read both books from Will Oxley, and I've been listening. I don't sleep at night, so I've been listening to this one podcast about weather, and then I listened to the National Weather Symposium, which was out in Seattle here in 2020, and I think it was a 12-hour session, and there were 8 different speakers, and every one of them mentioned the fact that, and this was all based on maritime weather, right? Every one of them mentioned the barometer. That if you don't have a barometer on your boat, no matter what you're doing, you're insane, because it is more accurate than any forecast you're ever going to get.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, when you're looking at grid files, you're looking at basically computer models of what they think, what the computer algorithm is thinking is going to happen. And, I never really had it budgeted to, pay somebody to do the weather routing and such. But, I've done it enough with the small trips around the Caribbean and back to the East Coast that I felt pretty confident in what I was seeing and everything. But I'm an expert at thinking I have a good wind window and just getting my butt kicked out there, especially in the Gulf Stream. I have a really bad knack of ending up in the wrong place at the wrong time when it comes to that. Man.
That's funny. So you could be a weatherman, is what you're saying.
I would love to. When I was younger, I always thought that'd be such a great career. Get up there and the sailing weatherman.
Whatever. Yeah. There you go. So what were some of the problems encounters? Did you have any major breakdowns, minor breakdowns? How did your food, stand, and water obviously was an issue.
Yeah, I definitely had some pretty big issues along the way. The first thing that started happening, again, this is an old boat, 1975. The mast and the boom are all original. And I remember when I was going through some of the heavy weather around Hurricane Ophelia, the winches were ripping off of the boom when I was putting, reef points in and stuff. And I looked and I could just see the amount of corrosion that had been going on. And, when I see it in one spot, I know it's probably everywhere on the boat. And so that sort of undermined me, made me a little bit nervous. But, beyond that, the boat really performed well. I didn't have just structurally, I didn't have many issues with the actual boat. It was more with things like the water pump, which was just a hand pump desalinator, pretty basic, right. On the lower end of the cost thing. And it produced maybe 20 gallons before it exploded and was completely unrepairable. And so, I really got to follow in Robin Knox Johnson's footsteps and have to catch rainwater for the majority of this trip. And, it was kind of interesting because, it's very scary when I got really low. I think the lowest I had on the boat was 2 gallons of fresh water. But it made it so that whenever it rained, it was magnificent. It was the greatest, wonderful thing in the world. And normally you're on a boat and you're out at sea, it starts raining, you have to go down below, it's miserable, you're wet, it's gross, and you're not doing it. But for me, I mean, it was just a godsend. It was great. And it changed my whole outlook on what it meant to rain, what it was, it was just amazing. And I'm glad, because I have a lot of these great memories of being up, 2 a.m, lightning crashing around me, and I'm up there with, cups and buckets, trying to gather as much as I can and just drinking it. It's just, I don't know. It was amazing. There were a lot of really good times that sort of came from really bad breakdowns, or really bad planning on my part, such right. with the food. I basically thought I provisioned the boat perfectly. I had my lists, I had my numbers and everything. Long story short, I definitely didn't. I was taking servings as meals, and it's more like 3 servings is 1 meal. And so when I started falling short, all I could do was ration. I mean, I was in the Southern Ocean at that point, and but what did end up happening once I was almost completely out of food by the time I rounded Cape Horn, and we had arranged for a boat to come out and meet me and throw a bunch of food right onto my boat. And that 36 hours of sailing into the Falklands and getting into, I think it's Port William, which is just outside of Port Stanley, and just hailstorms and all this stuff. It was amazing. And then to be able to get that food and break into, like a bag of cookies or a ham sandwich after, rationing for 2.5 months, it was definitely one of the highlights of my entire life. I mean, and, had I provisioned correctly, I would have never come close to the Falklands. I would have never had that experience, and it was the one drawback with that whole situation was that was the one time that I needed assistance on the voyage, where I needed help to be able to survive. And, so, but of my goals for this whole thing, that was the one where it's no problem. I didn't have to tie up to a dock. I didn't have to anchor, so technically I didn't stop. And so that was good, but it was, I mean, I still remember eating that ham sandwich that night, and it was unbelievable.
That is funny. So backing up to the water, obviously you mentioned, buckets and cups in the air. How did you catch water? What was the best way?
Well, I went through a couple different little systems trying to figure out what was best. And really it was pretty much what Knox Johnson did. He basically, he had a bucket that he would hang from the gooseneck, mast goes in the boom, and it would just pour off the sail and go in. I found that if I put one reef in the mainsail, that formed a perfect gutter, and I was able to use a pair of vice grips and clamp on a little funnel to that, and then the hose went right into a 5-gallon jerry can. And it was great because after a while of doing this, I would be able to, if the conditions were right, I could leave that whole system set and going, and I could go down below and go to sleep and do whatever. And there were a few times where I literally pop up, after 4 hours of sleep, and the thing is half full with fresh water, and I had nothing to do with it. And
really? That's awesome.
It was unbelievable. There's also times where, the thing is almost filled, almost 5 gallons, and then one big slapper wave would go right into the sail, pour straight into the bucket, and then I have to dump it right out. But, you take the good with the bad.
Yeah. So Graham mentioned the other night that any water he caught, he wouldn't put into the tanks because even as far out to sea as you can imagine, there was still bacteria in the air that would contaminate that water. Did you?
Yeah. Well, I didn't add anything to the tanks until I got almost into the Indian Ocean. And I think it was about the time as I was headed north that I started to notice what I call a cloud. And it was basically this grayish sort of cloud in the tank. And I started looking at the little filter that goes up, to the faucet, and that was all clogged up. It's like a sludge. And yeah, I mean, it was basically growing in there. The only thing I could do was add, a drop or two of bleach into each tank and hope that killed it off. I didn't have any stomach problems until about a week out from Gloucester when I was about to finish. Then I was definitely, there was something in the water that was making me, throw up every night. That went on for like 3 days until I sorted out what it was. But man, that's one of the scary things. And I have 2 different water tanks, and then I had 5-gallon jerry cans. And when I was getting really low on water, I would separate them out, because I knew that if, a little hole or a crack or something happens or one gets contaminated, at least I had the others. Because that's really the biggest fear, is that all of a sudden your whole water supply is contaminated. You're 1,000 miles from anybody, and that's it. You're pretty much stuck. I mean, I think my life raft had like 6 liters of water in it, but as a rule, you don't touch a life raft unless you're actually going to use it. You just don't do it. So
Now, did you carry bleach or anything that you could add to those cans just to try and keep any contaminants down?
Yeah, that was all I could do, was just a couple of drops, and it makes your coffee taste terrible and the water tastes bad, but at the same time, right, exactly. No offense, Florida, hey, but and it's just one of those things where you gotta try, but especially in the Southern Ocean, when it was raining pretty heavily, that water, I mean, I'd be up there collecting it and drinking it at the same time, and just tasted absolutely amazing.
That's awesome.
Fresh. And when you make like tea and coffee with really fresh rainwater, you can tell a difference. It definitely tastes pretty good.
Nice. Well, now you've got me convinced I'm going to have to go out there every night that it rains now to fill my coffee pot for the next day.
Probably got an airport there, although right now,
not many planes flying.
If there was ever a time to collect rainwater and drink it, right now would be that time.
There you go. So this whole thing did not pop up, but Lucian Deaton is asking, do you think the guys on the Vendée Globe folks zipping around the Southern Ocean on Imoca 60s are missing out on something that you on a traditional boat have gained?
Oh, absolutely. They're missing out on sleep. I was able to sleep a lot during the Southern Ocean trip. I mean, even in some of the more severe weather, once the boat gets into a good rhythm, I could crash out for 3, 4, or 5 hours. No problem at all. But no, I was able to experience some pretty unbelievable sights with whales, dolphins, some starry nights that I'll never find ever again. Things that you can only see when you're really going at a very slow pace. Yeah. And also the fact that, because I'm not racing, I'm not having to try and push the boat as hard. I can only imagine what life is like on an open 60 or something. I mean, it's got to be so intense that you're constantly just in production mode, just move, get the boat going. And, I had a lot of time when the weather was nice, because every once in a while it would be down there. You can crank back and read a good book and, watch. I was able to divert my course a little bit so that I could go and take a look at the Bounty Islands. I also got to see the snares. You definitely wouldn't do that if you were racing, that's for sure. So I think there's some aspects you miss, but to be frank, to be able to move that quickly and avoid severe weather rather than just get run over by it, I think is really, there's something to be said for that. When Motissier even back in the day talked about it, he said speed. The more speed you can have, the better, because it gives you a little bit more maneuverability and you can get the heck out of the way. Because some of those storms that do happen down there are just, they're absolute monsters. Nothing can stand up to them. Yeah.
So Patrick Stratton says, Jerome, knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
I definitely have a bit of an itch. I think I have another big trip in me for sure. I don't know if I would necessarily want to do the same route, just because I've done it again, with Randall Reeves sort of laying out the figure 8. And I know even though he definitely had to stop a few times getting through the Northwest Passage, he's basically sort of set the bar, and he said, well, now who's gonna do this one without stopping? And, I was dead set on taking off this summer, but with how things are unfolding in the world right now, it's probably not going to happen. But I don't know. I definitely am leaning towards at least doing maybe a circumnavigation of the Americas. But if
Okay.
I'm going to go that far, there's no reason not to just throw a quick lap of Antarctica in there. And you can see how cavalier I am when I say that, but it is. It's one of those things. If you're gonna do a big trip again, the way I think about it is I might as well go as big as I can. And that was a big part of the thinking with the first trip was just like, well, what's the biggest trip I can do? And it's go around the world. So we'll have to see. That one gets tricky because you got a motor through the Northwest Passage. There's not much wind up there, and you don't know if it's going to open or not. I think that's what scares me more than anything. You get up there, you can't get through. You're turning around and heading back into the North Atlantic during the peak of hurricane season, which is scary beyond belief to me. And so I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm pretty sure there's got to be at least a couple of people that are going to attempt it this year, but I guess only time will tell.
Exactly. So our good friend Mary Lou, you knew she was going to ask
Mary
a
Lou
question.
Scott. Hey, Mary Lou.
Hey, Jerome, besides Bud Light, what was the thing you ran out of that you missed the most?
I think I went through, obviously I make a pretty big thing about running out of the bacon, but the bacon wasn't going to last anyway. For me, really, I think when I ran out of like the last bit of chocolate and then ran out of the last bit of coffee, I was watching these things just sort of disappear from my life. And it just, it was one of those things where I was like, all right, now I got to learn from this. I can make these things last. I just need willpower. But then, some bad weather would come in and I'd be like, to heck with that. I'm going to eat all that right now. And I don't know. It's one of those things where, I don't know, if I had to choose one thing, I probably would have brought a much bigger library of books because I really had to pace myself on that. I didn't realize just how much time I would have just sort of floating around when you're becalmed and stuff like that. And, but I do have to say, Mary Lou, it's not Bud Light, it's Busch Light.
Even better.
Yeah, I'm in Michigan. Come on.
That's awesome. And actually, we pop this back up. Arlene says a quick lap around our Antarctica. Seems like you did that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess in some ways I did for sure, but yeah, I really shouldn't say it that way because it is. I mean, and it's one of those things where when you do venture down into the Southern Ocean, all joking aside, it's a very dangerous place, and you're on your own. I mean, even when these guys in the Golden Globe, they've got the full support teams and all that sort of stuff, but still, I mean, when some of those boats were dismasted and those sailors were stranded, it was a long time before anybody was able to get down there, and they had the world's attention. And you can only imagine if you're just some guy from Michigan who takes off, pretty much doesn't tell anybody he's doing it except his family. If something does go wrong, who knows? I don't even know what would happen. I mean, I'm sure my mom would pull whatever string she had to, but in reality, it's a pretty scary, dangerous place. And I get a lot of emails and letters from people that have either read the book or, just followed the story, and they want to, talk about, they want to do it, and, they need advice and this and that. And I'm always pretty frank with them. I like to see it because I was inspired by, fellow sailors that did it as well. But at the same time, I'm always very frank with them that it is, you're taking your life and you're rolling the dice in a lot of ways. And you cannot expect to go to a place like the Southern Ocean and think that you're ever going to be able to call for help and it's going to be there,
Yeah, it's days away.
Oh,
I mean,
totally.
They may be able to get a plane to you in a half a day, but then certainly not going to get a rescue boat to you anytime soon. So
exactly. And I mean, with the temperatures and everything down there, even if I ended up in my life raft, I don't know how long I'd be able to stay before I went hypothermic in that thing. So, some of the stories of like Pete Goss going back and getting, I forget the guy's name, but man, some of the rescue stories from the Southern Ocean are they're nail biting for me. It's unbelievable to read those.
Yeah. Patrick said the entire new U.S. Navy would have come after you. Had something gone wrong.
Well, I appreciate that, Pat. I really do.
So tell us a little bit about, your mental state. It had to have gone through some waves, right? Yeah. Have a beer for that one.
Yeah.
Tell us, obviously you have to go through waves of excitement and anticipation and then, boredom, what all comes along with all of that.
Well, I've always described being out at sea, especially by yourself, as an emotional roller coaster. And It really is dictated by, what's going on around you. And because that, the ocean is your ruler. That's it. You have you can only react to what it's giving you. And, being out there alone, especially for that long, I could go from laughing to screaming to crying in literally 2 hours, and that means the wind has come up and then it's completely died. And now big waves are coming in and I'm just sitting there like, what is going on? And, it's very tough to sort of deal with it. One of the tricks that I sort of harnessed earlier on in the trip was to really pull back how much I was thinking into the future. Because, obviously a trip of that magnitude is pretty daunting to try and consider, okay, 30,000 miles. How am I going to do this? Well, I started dialing it back to, okay, I've got to cross basically the North Atlantic first. So I'm going to tackle that. When you get in the Southern Ocean, it's more like I'm going to make it through today, or I'm going to make it through this little series of low pressure systems. Yeah. And that helped sort of take away the anxiety. And it wasn't easy at first by any means. It's something you sort of have to practice because you catch yourself being like, oh man, well I'm about to eat this, but what about when Cape Horn? And you're like, no, don't think Cape Horn, no Cape Horn. And, trying to sort of train yourself to do that, it took a while, but once you get into it, it almost just becomes second nature. And that definitely helped a lot. I remember feeling very, very insignificant and very small when whales would come around. And, especially in the Indian Ocean, where I had 2 whales that were ghosting along with the boat. I mean, literally acting like dolphins. And, that was when I sort of, it's so empty out there. You get a feeling that you're all alone, but then all of a sudden things start coming up and you realize that you're not alone and you're actually sort of intruding on somebody else's skirt who's way bigger, way stronger. And if he's not happy with you, you could be in some serious trouble. So there's definitely some fear there, and some uncertainty, but it's one of those things where you just sort of, you deal with it. And the longer you're out there, I think the more you sort of get into that realm of being a little more comfortable with it. I know the thought of an endless horizon, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is pretty scary for a lot of people. But for me, for whatever reason, I've always felt sort of comfortable out there. And I don't know, it almost feels like the Wild West. Like, you can do whatever you want. You're out in the middle of the ocean. Nobody's there. It's international waters. There's something that's always been pretty cool about that that I've always liked a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if that answered your question or not. I'll try my best with that. Oh, wait. Sorry. I did want to say, but the longer there's like a point, and I think I reached the point once I got back to the doldrums where I could feel my mind sort of slipping a little bit. Like I hadn't looked into a mirror in months and months, and you start to lose a little bit of your grip on what you consider normal everyday life, and talking to myself a whole lot more, and really just acting goofy. I mean, some of the videos that I have of me just talking to the camera. Oh, there's Skinny Man. Oh man, that was what I looked like the day after the Falkland Islands, and I started out the trip at 195 pounds. Whoa. I think I was down to maybe 150 there, something like that.
Man,
yeah, that was after a couple of cocktails they included in the food payload from the Falklands. Oh man, that was the only time I've ever had like a 6-pack abs. That's why I took a bunch. I took like 50 pictures that day.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I don't know why it's showing up on its side on the Facebook page, but that's all right.
Hey, we have to do it on boats. We're always doing it. It's no big deal.
There you go. Arlene says naked sailing.
No. All right. I'll tell you, Arlene, I used to do that when I was doing sort of my trials. So after I bought the boat, my dad and I sailed it to the British Virgin Islands, and then I spent the next, 4 or 6 months sailing around the Caribbean, out into the Atlantic and stuff like that. Just sort of training, because that was the first time I ever solo sailed. And right. I used to do that because down there it's 85 degrees and I'd be up there, you're just naked. I was leaning over the tiller and these control lines for my wind vane, which steers the boat. Mm-hmm. And the thing about the wind vane is it never stops. So these control lines are sort of inching like this. And I sort of laid down a little bit and the ropes moved and
you can stop talking now.
Yeah, really bad. You get the idea. It was bad and it hurt really bad. So I pretty much swore that off completely. And although I don't, it's not like I wear, a huge amount of clothes down there. Normally it's just a pair of boxers and that's about it. At least, in the trades. But I am. Yeah, it's a dangerous game doing that naked sailing stuff. I don't know how people do it.
That is too funny. It's not funny, but it is funny.
Hey, lesson. I learned that lesson the hard way, and
yeah. So when you got back, you decided to. Obviously, you went on tour. You even came to Sailing Inc. and talked to us one night. You've done a whole bunch of speaking at different clubs. And then you decided to write a book.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was one of those things. I didn't really know exactly what to expect once I got back. I knew I would probably do a couple of presentations, but I found that the story and the troubles and everything sort of lended itself to a pretty good presentation, and it's been received really well in all sorts of audiences. I went out to Arizona for 5 different talks with a bunch of real estate people, everything. It's been pretty amazing. And I knew I wanted to write a book, but I wasn't sure if I could. And very, very coincidentally, I was able to sit down with an author, John U. Bacon, who did the Great Halifax Explosion, amongst other, bestsellers. And he outlined, what I would need to be able to do it. He basically said, just make sure you have 4 hours every single day without a single break that you can do this. And you're in a place where you're not distracted. Once you start, you never stop. You just keep doing it those 4 hours every day. And so I sailed down to the Caribbean. I was on anchor, and that's what I did. And I think the story had great bones in the beginning, and it just needed a cleanup, and it needed a good editor and all that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, I just didn't have the funds to be able to do it, and so the first initial bunch of them, definitely riddled with typos and things like that. Anybody that's watching that read any of those early editions, but you'll be happy to know that I finally have somebody who went over the book with a fine tip pen, and so now all that stuff's been corrected and polished over, and now the newer edition is available, and so I think it I think it conveys a different perspective on the voyage. Obviously, I've read all of the other ones, and I can't speak for myself, but the letters that I get from people who have read the book all say the same thing, and they say it's like I'm sitting there and telling the story to you as you read it, and it sort of just sheds a pretty personal sort of light on what it's like day in and day out to actually go out and do a trip like this and sort of live that dream. So, and it's been amazing. I mean, I was just wrapping up a 5 little stop tour just before everything got crazy in March. And those were the first talks that I was actually selling the book. And it was just so cool because, you talk and then you sit at a table and you got a pile of books. People signing them. I don't know. I felt like I was in like a movie or something like that. So it was really cool. But yeah, I mean, the amount of support that I've gotten from people that I knew at Bitter End or up here at Michigania has been amazing. And, they've been trying to get the word out about the book. And yeah, I just hope people enjoy it. And I absolutely love doing it.
Well, I just put up there, and I can put it up again, but you can find the book on Amazon. Just type in the search box, Sailing into Oblivion, and it comes in a paperback and ebook version. So it's inexpensive, and it's a great read, and I suggest that you guys log into Amazon and grab one while you can.
Thanks for the plug, Bill. I appreciate that.
That way we can fund this Golden Globe effort that we're all going to get behind.
Oh, my mom's going to kill me. Well, Bill, I can't thank you enough. I mean, like I said, as I was sort of peeling through some of the backlog of these talks, I was definitely seeing some pretty heavy hitters, and to be I feel honored, to be honest, because really it's like, whoa, that guy was on here. Holy smokes. Whoa. Okay. All right. Big shoes to fill here. Better not screw up, but
no, not at all. Not at all. You're a great speaker, and you're, everybody thinks about it. Just like you said, everybody thinks about doing things like this, and you actually did it. So we all wanted to know how you did it, and we love hearing from you. And obviously we're following you like crazy on Facebook and everything else. So, and you have a following. The number of people that came to our loft from all over the Southeast just to hear you speak for probably the 3rd, 4th, or 5th time was amazing. It's pretty cool.
Well, and that was one of the longest Q&A sessions I've ever had. I think I was up on stage for an hour after the presentation. Just to answer, everybody was so into it that night. I think it might have been the fact that we had a keg of beer there. That usually helps a little bit, but so nobody wanted to leave anyway. But yeah, that was a great talk. It's so funny. I mean, how much time has gone by? It's crazy. Time flies.
Well, apparently my service manager says he's going to crew for you on the next go around.
Oh, there we go. Not bad. I may, a buddy of mine from the Appalachian Trail hit me up, and he may actually be joining me because I've got to sail the boat back up to Maine at the end of May, beginning of June. And so if he does, he'll be the first crew on an offshore passage since I bought the boat, since my dad and I sailed it. So I don't know how that's going to go. I don't know if I'm going to freak out, but
we're going to have to put a GoPro on that boat just to watch the reaction.
We'll see how there'll be updates, I'm sure.
All right. So again, we appreciate you coming. Is there anything else that you kind of want to get out there to the world? While we're going through this, we're all sitting around thinking about sailing, give us a little bit of inspiration.
Well, I would say that, one of the things when I was out there that I felt a lot of the time was that I felt out of control. Not myself, but the world around me. And, out in the middle of the ocean whatever is going on with the wind and the waves, you have no control over it. And like I had said, when you think way too far into the future, it gets so overwhelming. But if you sort of bring everything back a little bit, don't try and think of what's going to happen over the next 3 weeks from now until the middle of May, but just think about what's going on today, tonight, maybe tomorrow, and if you are feeling overwhelmed because of the uncertainty that's going on right now, just try to take a minute to, focus on what's going on right now, right around you. And if you can find little things, you'll start to notice that, maybe there are some nice little things happening here and there. That, and I would definitely say, make sure if there's anybody on your phone list that you haven't reached out to and talked to in days, years, whatever, do it. I mean, this is the perfect time to reconnect with people. And, it helps, especially if you're feeling not that great and feeling scared and uncertain. That's the time when, you just call some people up and talk to them about it. Because if you bottle that stuff up, it's only going to get worse. And right now, everybody's trying to help everybody just get through this. And, that's the biggest thing you can do.
Well, that's a great message. Wow. I'm going to have to go charge my phone now.
Do it, Bill. Do it.
All right, Jerome. Well, I tell you what, we're going to sign off here, but give us a call when you're headed down to Beaufort to the boat again. Let us know if you need anything. And,
absolutely. For sure.
We'll get you taken care of. Hang on, Arlene. The middle of the story is where you get your strength to love the beginning of your story.
Middle of the story.
Okay. The beginning and the end of your story is great, and you get the strength to love it while you're in the middle of it.
Oh, nice. I like that.
Those are good words, Arlene.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, Bill. Thank you very much. Everybody have a great night. Thanks for tuning in.
We'll talk to you soon. I'm going to play your video on the exit here. So, all right. See you later, Jerome.
See you, Bill. Thanks.
Bye.
I started sailing sort of late in life compared to most people. And I think it was somewhere around the point where I started doing offshore ocean sailing, just yacht deliveries and such when I was in my early 20s. And at that point, I started to really enjoy being out there, and then started reading some of the old books, Bernard Moitessier and Robin Knox Johnson. And I must have read Sailing Alone Around the World by Joshua Slocum 10 times. And the idea of just being out there and sort of living this completely different life to what most people live nowadays, just it fascinated me. And I had to see what it was like. I spent about 6 months sailing on the boat by myself in preparation, trying to break everything I could and fix it and break it and fix it, and until I knew how to fix it correctly. And then after that, it was spending the whole summer trying to get the boat ready for the actual trip. The boat typically will do about 5 or 5.5 knots as an average speed. So it's looking like probably around 280 days is the best estimate I can do. But again, a lot of things can go. Wind can change and things can break down and slow me down. I mean, it's my rough estimate, basically.
All right, the plan is I'm going to start off here. I'm going to ride the current across about 2/3 of the way across, and then I start my way down. And I head down a little bit closer towards Brazil. And then I come down riding the current almost in the center. In the center is a big calm patch. So I'm going to go around that, and then I hit the Southern Ocean. The westerlies take me all the way across, underneath Australia, underneath Tasmania, underneath Stewart Island, New Zealand, cross all the way over, and then I come all the way across, go underneath Cape Horn, keep going across for a little bit, catch the current going north, cross here, do my flyby of the Bitter End Yacht Club, and then straight up past Bermuda, right back.
I think I'm most excited, honestly, about rounding each of the capes, Cape of Good Hope, Cape Lewin, south of Tasmania, south of New Zealand, and then Cape Horn. And obviously Cape Horn is kind of the big one. I've never really worried too much about the actual solidarity of the trip. And I do kind of find there are some perks. You're not going to ever disturb anybody if you feel like listening to loud music at 3 a.m. If you want to eat all the bacon, nobody's going to get mad at you. I'm not trying to set any records or anything like that, and I'm not trying to make sort of a statement about, I don't know, my sailing abilities or anything like that, but there's something about being able to go and do the whole trip around without stopping and getting back, doing it on your own. I feel like things like this are slowly fading into the background, and maybe it takes doing trips like these to remind people what life is really all about.
All right, guys. Thanks for everybody coming out.
I love you.
I think these sort of experiences are what life is all about, and sitting there and dreaming about it and then letting sort of time creep by to the point where I couldn't go and do this, I think that would be harder to take in the end than the 280 days of solidarity out there will be, for sure.